Right now, I'd like to introduce Rob Bookman, who was counsel for the New York Nightlife Association, for his remarks.
Thank you all. Now we're going to come to the substantive part of the meeting, in which we're actually going to start going over the best practices guidelines, which were handed out in the booklet that you were given. This booklet, when I refer to the numbers, I'm going over certain highlighted numbers. It'll be the numbers in those first few pages as we come over them. The working group developed these to assist nightlife owners in maintaining safe bars, lounges, and clubs. We want to continue to have the world's best nightlife, to continue to be the world's safest nightlife, and to be able to do that, we need to have a cooperative working relationship with the world's best police department. We think, as a result of this, we're there, and we need to orient all of you now in what we are recommending as best practices so that you can all go forward and start doing it. Clearly, this needs to be adapted to your own premises and situations. Not every recommendation is applicable to every establishment. We don't pretend that it is. And many of the recommendations, as you go over them and become familiar with them and ask questions about them, you will see that they clearly need to be adapted to your personal circumstances. And I'll try to give some examples of that as we go through them. Use your best judgment when going through these guidelines, because they are guidelines. They're not a set of laws and regulations. And we're hoping that by voluntarily adopting these guidelines, there will be no need for there to be more laws and regulations, but that we will take the lead in creating an atmosphere that we create a cooperative one with our neighborhood and with the police department. Common sense is going to be a term that the police commissioner already used once. I will use many times. You'll hear throughout the afternoon. In your approach to adopting these things, use common sense. And many of the recommendations are common sense recommendations. And many of them, of the recommendations, many of you are already doing. So it won't be all new information for you. If you want, when you go back to your premises, to get more copies of the Best Practices Guide, there are two websites that are up on the PowerPoint presentation, the Police Department's website and the Nightlife Association's website. You can download it from those websites. With the Nightlife Association, we are in our 10th year now, but about 2 years ago we merged as a chapter with the New York State Restaurant Association. So it's not a mistake when we say go to that website, the www.nysra, which stands for New York State Restaurant Association.org. You'll see the link to the best practices there. There's also a nightlife page there. And to follow up on what David said, there is a membership table in the back as you leave for a membership for the Nightlife Association. So you get 2 in 1. You also become a member of the Restaurant Association by joining our chapter, and you will benefit from their various programs, including their ongoing Serve Safe alcohol program, which is something we recommend all of you to do. It's not a specific recommendation within the guidelines, but it's a common sense course. It helps with your insurance, and it's a common sense course on overconsumption, knowing how you serve is to recognize it, knowing when to stop serving people, how to deal with those situations, and the best practices guidelines are going to become a component now of the Serve Safe alcohol classes that we teach here in the city. So you can get further training on best practices by signing up for one of those classes as well. Is that a good enough plug, Chuck? Okay. All right, so without further ado, let's discuss the first recommendation, number 1, security guards. While there will be discussion later on with Rob Messner about who is required to be a security guard, what the law requires, what I'm referring to here, what I'm going to discuss is this issue about having security guards, and I'm assuming for this purpose of this discussion that they will all be licensed security guards. We'll deal with the law later. Our recommendation is that for establishments on any particular night where there's going to be at least 75 people in your premise, that you have at least one licensed security guard in the place, and that number increases an additional security guard for each additional 75 people. Now, one of the common sense, there we go, approaches is you will know generally what kind of crowd to expect on any particular night, if it's a promoted night or whatever, and you may determine that 1 per 75 is not enough for that particular crowd that's coming that night. You may determine that 1 per 75 is way more than is necessary for a particular crowd that's coming that night. But it's a guideline, and we feel that it is a good guideline to work with, and we also feel that it is a good idea, even for small premises, to have at least one person in the place that's a licensed security guard at all times, even if you don't reach that 75-person threshold. Because the truth of the matter is, in the real world, if somebody's doing something unlawful in your premise, if a fight breaks out, there is somebody responsible there to stop it. And it is good to, therefore, have at least one person who's been properly trained to deal with those situations, and that would be a licensed security guard. So even if the law doesn't require it, we're suggesting that you do it. And in light of that, door people. If you have a door people, anybody at the door, again, whether it's technically required for them to be licensed or not is, we will discuss later. We think it's a good idea for anybody at the door to be a licensed security guard, with the exception of if it's the owner who's just coming out for 20 minutes. That person, the owner, obviously doesn't have to be a licensed security guard. Or if it's a little person, man or female, looking like me with a clipboard who's checking the VIP list, obviously that person doesn't need to be the security guard. But if it looks like a security guard, if it's a big beefy guy dressed in black with an earring, to say, well, that person's really not doing security tonight, so they're not a licensed security guard, is not common sense. So we're suggesting that that person get to be licensed. It's not expensive, it's not onerous, and it's a good idea for you as well, because while under the ABC law you are not allowed to have any convicted felons working in your establishments, most of us do a good faith inquiry in our employment practices as to whether that's true or not, but you're obviously not doing security. You're not doing fingerprints and background checks for everybody that works for you, but licensed security guards are going through fingerprints and background checks. So it's good to know that the person at your door, no matter what they're doing, is not a convicted felon, and you could find that out by having them go through the licensed security. The next number I want to talk about is number 4, establishment policies about calling 911. That's what this is really all about here today. As the Commissioner said, we are hoping to instill here today what I would say the responsible people in the industry who have chosen to come here, and to follow up on the Commissioner's kind invitation to be here, a new dichotomy, a new mindset. And that new dichotomy and mindset is what every other licensed, lawful, tax-paying business in the city of New York always feels like they have the right to do, which is call the police in appropriate circumstances. We understand that previously people were fearful of doing that. What we're trying to say is, starting today, put that fear aside, that if you do what's in this booklet, you have no reason to fear calling the police in appropriate circumstances for assistance, or to report a serious criminal incident, or any other criminal activity. So when you're breaking up that fight and you're separating them, as we suggest that you do, that your security does here, we're also suggesting go ahead and call the police. So they will respond, we will work together, and we will make sure that that does not escalate into a more serious incident. That's really what best practices is really all about.